Hey, hope you're doing well. Today I want to show you how I did a portrait of a young woman who was sitting at the same table in church as I sit at with Robin and Robin's mom. Just to explain the table part, our church has something called a contemporary service or table service. And the idea is for people to sit at tables and listen to the the sermon and the message and all that, and the music. The music is really good. They have a band. So it's more contemporary, and people, as people do, tend to sit at the same place, myself included. And so every week we sit together. Once in a while there's somebody different at our table. But we do get to know other people in the room, not just the people at our table. But anyway, there's a young lady at our table. Her name is Magdalena, and she's been so kind and so friendly. And when you pray, when the pastor says everybody pray, everybody bows their head and closes their eyes, right? And myself included. But once in a while, I look around while people are praying, and I saw Magdalena praying, and I just loved the way she looked. But I wasn't quick enough. I didn't get my camera out. I wanted to take a picture of her to use it potentially as a painting. And then the next time the pastor asked for prayer, I did it again. I watched as she prayed, and she had her back turned to me, so it wasn't a good shot. Third time was a charm. I pulled out my phone camera, took a quick, inconspicuous picture, and then I used that photograph as the reference photo for the portrait that I did. This is the portrait. Let me show you. Make sure it gets focused. I have a tendency to mess up on the focus part of this. Okay, and then I shake the camera. But anyway, so that's Magdalena. That's the portrait I did. And I want to show, and you see I put I don't know if that's subliminal or not, but there's a cross in there. And I did it on Procreate, and I'm going to show you a time-lapse recording of that. Procreate makes a time-lapse video automatically if you don't shut that off. If you don't shut that off, it's on there. So I decided to use that because I wasn't recording myself as I did this painting. All right, I'm going to narrate it as it plays. Okay, here we go. All right, so again, if I didn't pronounce my words correctly, her name is Magdalena. Magdalena. She goes by the nickname Dang also. So this is how the Procreate replay looks. I slowed it down so that I would have more time to explain what you're seeing here. The way the reference photo works, well, you could use a reference photo just sitting off to the side. You don't have to put it on the screen. But in this case, I did. I put the reference photo on the screen, and I set it to the left of the page, the canvas area, which is the white area. So basically on the iPad screen on the left side was the reference photo. On the right side was a blank white screen that I started sketching on, which you can see here. The Procreate app records the different brush strokes, or in this case pencil strokes. And I was using I don't know if there's a name for the method I use, but if you're sketching in real life, which is what I did for a few years, you try to put the person you're sketching, your subject, in line with your paper. That way you can see the top of their head goes here, the bottom of their chin goes there, that kind of thing. And in the real world, when there's somebody sitting, you do it as quickly as you can because they're going to move. So you try to get the first lines first. When you're working with a photograph, however, nobody's going to be moving, so you have everything kind of lined up. It's almost like the grid method, but there's no grid. In the grid method, if you have ever used that, you put a grid over the photograph, and that breaks the photograph down into little tiny squares. You put that same grid on the white drawing surface, and then each one of those tiny squares you just fill in. So then your artwork doesn't have to be perfect for the whole picture. It just has to be perfect for that little square, as perfect as can be. It's not what I used, but when you do the side-by-side method, which I guess is what I'll call that, it makes it a lot easier. And so it is basically just a pencil sketch. And she was wearing a sweater, or some kind of a garment with almost like a corduroy look, with lots of lines, visual lines in it. I did not draw every single line. I just created the effect of the lines. And later on, you'll see when I paint it, I even pretty much ignore most of the sketch lines and just use the painting techniques that I would use for her clothing. In a portrait, you try to capture the likeness absolutely. You don't want to mess up anything. You don't want that to be artistic interpretation or artistic license. You want to get the likeness. It's absolutely important. When I did quick sketches outside of Universal Studios here in Florida, or outside of Disney here in Florida in the resorts, my main goal was to capture a likeness. I did not do caricatures. I didn't do the big nose, big teeth, big head, little body. I didn't do that. What I did was the same thing I would do in a live sitting. Well, they are live sittings, but I did the same thing you would do if you were creating a portrait, a finished portrait. But I did the quick sketch, the first rough sketch. If you look at some of the sketches of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, you'll see that I'm not new to this. This has been happening for hundreds of years, so artists have always used sketches. All right, well, obviously at this point, I'm up to the painting, so let me explain why the paper/canvas changed color. It's because I wanted it to be a grayish, or in this case, almost like a brownish gray. It makes it easier to see the lighter colors, even if I'm going to paint over it. Now, sometimes in traditional painting, I will put an underpainting. Excuse me. I will put an underpainting, and the underpainting often is a complementary or opposite, somewhat opposite color to what you're putting on it in eventually. So you could use a color wheel to make it easier on yourself. So if it was a blue sky, for example, you might want to put an orange sky first and then do the blue sky over it. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here. I didn't use that technique here. I basically used the iPad to the color selector on the iPad. I used that to figure out what color would be best for Magdalena's skin tone, and the most detailed parts are her face and her fingers. Those were the two parts I had to really, really focus in on. So you can't tell by watching here. I'll zoom in a little bit in post-production. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. But I zoomed in pretty close. I opened up the screen, if you will, spread my fingers across it and brought it very close. And that made it possible for me to get into those little tiny areas between her fingers and between her hands, and even the spaces between her face and her hands. Some of the tiny spaces in her ear, for example, are that way also. The other thing I was very conscientious of is the contrast. I wanted to make sure there was a sharp contrast between two areas. It was not so obvious in the photograph, but in the painting I wanted it to be, maybe you would say, more dramatic. So that's why you see the hands are a lot brighter than the face. So there's almost like a straight line on her hand that separates her hand from her face. And in this particular case, this particular portrait, Magdalena has her eyes closed, which I guess you could say it makes it easier because there's no eyes to actually paint. It's just the eyelashes and the eyebrows and then the shadows around her eyes and the light spots. So, and that's something you just have to work with. I'm using, by the way, the oil brush on Procreate. I went, see, the wristwatch is already painted on there. That was relatively easy, believe it or not. Basically, the wristwatch is like 3 tones in this painting. There's an off-white for the face of the wristwatch, and then there's a dark brown and a light brown, which is almost white, creating the rest of the wristwatch. It's just a bunch of lines, and even the hands and the places where the numbers would be on the face of the dial are the same way, just little dashes. If you look at it closely, there's little dashes. Her hair was, of course, important. She has beautiful hair, beautiful black hair, and the hair was reflecting the light, and I liked the way that looked, just as it was in the photograph, so I didn't change that at all. A nice glow. This is where I'm painting in the sleeves, the little texture on the sleeves. She had a bracelet there. The bracelet is done the same way as the wristwatch was, with some browns and some whites. The browns mixed a little bit with orange so that it would have that almost like a silver goldish color to them. So here I'm doing some broad brush stroke fill-ins just to give it some color, some lights, some darks. And then later on, I'll go back over it with the lines. There they go. There's the lines. Just to fill in those lines, as I mentioned in the beginning when I was doing the sketch, I was a little bit more detailed than I probably needed to be. And so when I went to the painting, I just used, I guess some artistic license on her shirt, on her sweater. The face and the hands, as I said, were really crucial to be very, very close to, as close as possible to how she looks, as a likeness. But the sweater didn't need to have the perfect likeness, so I kind of took a little bit of license right there. In a moment, you're going to see that I changed the composition. I didn't think I wanted her just like that in the middle of the painting. I wanted the whole painting to have a better feel to it than that. And I had this idea for the background to be bright to her on the left side of the painting and then darker on the right side, so that it looks like the light is coming across her. In the actual photograph, there are other people in the photograph. There's a cup. There's a cup in front of her. Somebody's hands are on this side of her. But I just painted it around them and filled in what I couldn't see. So in just a moment, see right now, it's hard to tell what I'm doing because it's so, it's just the lines. It's a series of dark and light lines and experimenting with shadows. There we go. And this whole thing took about 6 hours. So to speed it up like this into 12 minutes or whatever it is, it's, I don't think you would want to watch a 6-hour video of me painting a picture. That would be kind of. I do some what do you call them? Real-time videos on this channel. But when I do a real-time video, it's usually like a watercolor, a greeting card or something like that. I think I have a couple of 2-hour videos, but a watercolor greeting card takes about 45 minutes or so. But a portrait takes a lot longer. I used to do portraits on velour paper using pastels, and I did so many of those, and they come out so beautifully, and they take a long time. I guess 12 hours or so, maybe more. But digital makes it possible to be a lot quicker, And also it makes it possible to change things, as you're going to see when I enlarge Magdalena and bring her closer to the edges and then put in the background. I couldn't do that on velour. And also on velour, you'd have to be sure of what the background is, whereas with digital, you can experiment a lot and undo things that you don't like, which is, it's just a wonderful thing we have. I know if you're old like me, you might be a little bit reluctant to use new technology, but ultimately the finished product is what's important. So right there was the moment where you saw me enlarge Magdalena and fill in the picture with more, make it a better composition. And now I'm painting over her and under her to create the background the way I want it. I didn't want it quite so contrasting. Now that right there where it looks like the shadows are being played with is exactly what I'm doing. I put a layer on top of her. Again, something you cannot do in traditional art. But I put a layer on top of her, and I was experimenting with some lights and darks to exaggerate the shadows a little bit. And then, of course, on the background to add that golden cross. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Subscribe if you can, and I'll see you later.